Okay, so we've imaged our patient with the correct positioning, and now we're back at the acquisition screen looking at the patient's chart, and we're going to open up the CPCC and start to read. So we'll simply double click on our CT, and it's going to load AIS 3D, which is the viewer software that we're going to be using. When AIS 3D first opens, we're going to be in what's known as the scout plane. That is when you see these four panels. We have a 3D rendering panel, a axial panel on below it, a sagittal panel on the lower right, and a coronal panel on the upper right. This is where you can get your initial read, if you prefer to, of the patient prior to moving forward with the bigger steps. But let's take a pause here and take a look at what else is on this screen. So just to go over the top toolbar first so that we can all get comfortable with what we're going on here. We have at the top a save button. If you were to do a project where you added a nerve mapping, some implants, maybe brought in a dental model, and you wanted to not have to redo that, you could hit save and end up saving your project. So simply hitting save, it'll recommend calling it project 1. Maybe we just call it test project. You can call it whatever you'd like and click OK. That will go ahead and save. And I'll show you when we get back to the acquisition software where that gets saved. Next, you have the reset button. This will help to reset any panels if you've gotten lost. So resetting will center everything back to the middle of where your axial slice is. Okay. The layout button is very useful. It opens up the different layout options for each sub panel that we're in. So as we work our way down the wizard on the left side, there's going to be different options for layout. We can choose the one we're in now. You can just have the 3 slices. We can have the 3D larger and the 3 slices on the right. Okay, so this is the one that I prefer. You can take screenshots. This will take a screenshot of the entire window. So if you want to place an implant or take a screenshot of some pathology or caries or any sort of thing like that, you can hit the screenshot button. It'll save it directly to the patient's chart. So it'll become one of those 2D images in the patient's imaging chart. The white level balance here, when you toggle it on, allows you to click and drag and change the contrast and the white level and the brightness. Okay, and we'll toggle it back off by clicking it again. The ruler button is very important for CBCT. What's one of the greatest advantages of CT is its true measurements. So when we click on the ruler drop down, we have distance, angle, annotation, ROI, bone density, find measurements, and clear all measurements. If we start with the simplest and the one we're going to use the most often, it's distance. Clicking on any 2 places in one panel will give you an exact distance all the way to 0.1 millimeter. So let's say we want to measure from the center of this canine to the center of this canine. And we can click and hold on to the measurement and move it out of the way if it's in our way of viewing, but it can give you all the way to the 10th of a millimeter. Okay, and then it can be updated too by clicking and dragging on the endpoints of that line that you drew. If we decide to do the angle, say we want to check the angle of this tooth as it is to the occlusal plane. First click is at the vertex of the angle, and the second and third click are kind of the 2 outside parts of the angle. So that can be useful for angled implants, angled screw channel planning, or a number of different things, right? So that's how we get an angle on the ruler measurement. Annotation is great for before you use that screenshot. So if I were to click on something and I can annotate and say lower incisor, and you can type in whichever you prefer. What that does is it puts those words and a little arrow here. So let's get this the right direction. So we can put our arrow towards whatever we're trying to point at, whether it's pathology or some sort of thing we want to notate. And then when we take a screenshot, this will obviously show up in our screenshot, so it can be saved to that direction. The ROI gives us a like a pentagon. And when we're done with the ROI, there's a little button on the bottom that says Finish Polygon. It's going to give us a number of information. So it's going to tell you the total area that you just selected, the perimeter distance, and it's going to give you the max and minimum Hounsfield units. So that might be really useful if you're looking for how dense is this area. Maybe you're looking at a bone graft. Maybe you're looking at the area for a larger bone graft or something similar to that. But that gives you a lot of information. And then we have the bone density, which also kind of gives you an idea of just turning on the bone density levels. You can do find all measurements, so it gives you a list of the ones you've already done. So if I click on distance 1, it snaps back to the screen, the angle I had it on when I first did it. So that's nice, because as you move around in the CT, you see those go away because those are only made in one slice. So if I want to say, you know what, let's go back to that first distance, everything will snap back to where it was exactly when I did that distance, okay? And if we have too many like we do now, we can do clear all measurements. So get used to that ruler tool and that drop down. There's a lot of really helpful things in there, okay? If we go all the way to the far right, we have some undo and redo buttons for simple backing up and going forward. If you placed an implant or accidentally moved an implant, didn't mean to, or something like that, you can undo and redo. And then some settings, some info, and some help FAQ stuff. And of course the exit button. So while we're here, let's go into the settings button. Inside of our settings, we have quite a few settings. And generally this doesn't need to be touched more than the first time once you're comfortable with what your settings are. But you can change things like font size. You can change stuff like implant step value. So every time I tell it to go to a bigger implant, that's how much bigger it's going to go. There are things like the hint window, which is used for implant planning as well, and some different options for when replacing implants. If we go to the implant panel, you can turn on and off the nerve warning. So otherwise, you can pick the minimum distance here. So for me, it's 2 millimeters. I want to know if the implant I plan is within 2 millimeters to any nerve that I mapped in the software. So you could turn that off if you wanted to, or just update what your comfort level is with that minimum distance. You also have a security zone around your implant. So this has a very faint outline around the implant that shows you kind of that distance. So I have it set to 1.5. So when we plan an implant, you'll see we have this very faint outline, 1.5 millimeters on either side. And that's what I use to know that I'm completely in the bone that I need to be, or away from adjacent teeth or what have you. Okay. You can change the different colors here, default colors for your different objects. And as we come into 3D settings, more and more stuff. And generally, we don't touch a lot of the stuff. If you want to take a look at this based on your computer speed and whatnot, talk to your imaging specialist about what's the most appropriate, okay? We have the reports, and the reports tab is going to allow you to put default things like your doctor's name, your patient, if you want to have a default patient name, and then your office's logo. So changing the logo here is as simple as clicking the Change Logo Image button and uploading your practice's logo, probably in a PNG format with a transparent background. And what that's going to allow it to do is when you export reports, which we'll get to when we get to the reports panel, your logo will be front and center on top of that. So just kind of keep the brand nice. For sleeves, this is more advanced techniques. If you want to create your own sleeve, like you know your guided kit very well and you know these exact measurements, you can create your own guided sleeves. You can also create your own types of pins, so custom pins if you so desired to, okay? And then same with models. If you have, say your implant company has not given their STL files to Acteon and you want to be able to place the exact measurement of that implant, you could fill this all out for each exact implant that you want to place. And so you have all the freedom to change those customizations as needed. But generally, we're going to stick to the general, the implant tab, and then probably just change the reports logo in this setting. Okay, so we'll click cancel here. And then when we come back in the next video, we're going to go through exactly what each of these subpanels does, and we'll kind of work our way down on how to best and most efficiently and accurately read this patient's CBCT.